The first witness in Donald Trump's New York City criminal trial is facing cross-examination today. Trump is accused of falsifying records to cover up a payment made to adult film actor Stormy Daniels during the 2016 election. Prosecutors say this was a case of election interference. Trump denies the charges. He spoke to reporters in the hallway of the courthouse, where he had one specific complaint about the courtroom.
We have another day of court in a freezing courthouse. It's very cold in there, on purpose, I believe. They don't seem to be able to get the temperature up. It shouldn't be that complicated.
CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett is outside the courthouse following this story for us. So, Errol, how have we seen the questioning of David Pecker evolve over the course of this week, and where is the questioning of him focusing today?
Hey there, Elaine. Great to see you this afternoon. Just to pick up on what Donald Trump was complaining about as far as the temperature in the courtroom, if you can see by the state of this courthouse behind me, it is not the lap of luxury. It's a hardcore criminal proceeding here, and so people's comfort, especially a defendant in a courtroom, isn't really a priority for the proceedings. David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, has been the first witness this week, and he's established two things. First, that he's still an admirer of Donald Trump. He is a friend of his going back decades, and had this understanding that publishers could pay to suppress certain stories about celebrities or amplify and manipulate perhaps paparazzi to take pictures of others. And as it relates to Donald Trump, he kind of detailed this sequence of events in which he agreed to be Donald Trump's eyes and ears on the campaign trail in 2015 as he was making his first attempt to get to the White House. He had known of a story of a doorman who said he was aware of an illegitimate child that Trump had. He was ready to publish that story and ended up not publishing it because he found it not to be credible. Then the story of former Playboy model Karen McDougal and her alleged months-long affair with Donald Trump was something he discovered. And the jury heard in detail how Pecker paid for the rights to Karen McDougal's story, some $150,000, but ultimately was not reimbursed by anyone related to Donald Trump. And Michael Cohen, the fixer and lawyer at the time, was the man facilitating all of this. Once Donald Trump made it to the White House after the Access Hollywood tape emerged, and after he discovered that Stormy Daniels, the pornographic actress, also had a similar story, it then changed from Pecker saying Michael Cohen should pay for the rights to that story and get reimbursed afterwards, kind of suggesting that he had already been burned by Trump once out of pocket and didn't want to do it again. As we've now approached the cross-examination where Donald Trump's defense team has questioned him, they've questioned his memory. They've tried to make him seem inconsistent. They've tried to suggest that because he was given an immunity deal, because he also participated in the guilty plea that Michael Cohen took in a separate case, or a separate case related to these payments, they're trying to make the jury doubt his testimony. But he is implicated by now, Donald Trump directly, Michael Cohen, those close to Donald Trump, not just before the presidency, Elaine, but once Trump was in the White House making decisions from the Oval Office, and including people funded by taxpayers to make decisions on how to suppress these stories. So a very significant week for the jury as they listen and watch all of this unfold.
So all of that with David Pecker. Tell us about the next witness. Who is she, and what can you tell us about her role in this case?
So as part of this scheme that continued to when Donald Trump was in the White House, Pecker testified that Rona Graff was someone who he witnessed participate in all of this. She's the next witness, and she's crucial because she is Donald Trump's former executive assistant and senior vice president of the Trump Organization. The jury has heard Pecker testify that he witnessed, while he was in Donald Trump's office, Rona Graff entering the room, handing invoices and checks to Donald Trump, of which he would review and then sign. Remember, the backbone of this case are 34 felony counts, specifically as they relate to falsified business records that made financial transactions seem as if they were for legal fees, when in reality they were payments specifically to Michael Cohen for paying back, for paying Stormy Daniels to keep her story secret. So we expect her to take the stand next, and it really is the world closing in around Donald Trump. These are people who, as far as Pecker is concerned, sees himself as a friend of Donald Trump. He called Trump a mentor. Rona Graff would be Donald Trump's right-hand woman in much of this, so she's expected to be the next witness.
All right, a lot of testimony for those jurors to absorb. Errol Barnett for us. Errol, thank you.
Yeah.